Thank you for coming. This is an online gathering on today is February 22nd, 2025. And this is a discussion session about how to run a practice, subtitled Big and Small. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can and start going. Give me a second.
Are they on?
All right, and here we go. How am I doing? Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
How to run a practice, big and small. So like I say, this is hopefully a conversation and a chance to share some ideas. I was thinking about some stuff, so I've got ideas to go, but I'm sure you have things that will keep me honest and things I haven't thought about. So here we go. So I'll start talking about small practices. So it's good to know who you're going to have or who's showing up. If you most likely with a small practice, you know who the other ringers are and what they want to ring. But you may not, and if you don't, you can ask, and that would be in your best interest and everybody's best interest to ask some questions about what they want to ring. There's also a question I think about. I guess kind of the goals or how ambitious the group is. If they're happy, just kind of doing what they're doing, or if they want to push themselves, that's a good thing to know. That affects how you might run your practice.
Well, Tom, quick question. You might be bringing this up later. What happens if you have, how do you handle, like, if you have a couple visitors that come to your practice, they're just coming for the one night or the one Sunday service ringing?
Yeah, okay.
Do you give them, how did you ask them?
You have options certainly, right? If you know what they can do, that's a good place to start, right?
Right.
They might be.
They might say that they can do more than they really can because they want to get that experience. We've had problems, somebody comes in and says, "Oh, I can ring Bob Miner," and it's a Sunday morning and they can't ring Bob Miner, or not on our bells or something. So it's always you don't want to make them feel bad.
That's a tricky one, yeah.
I know.
Well, what can you do? You can talk to them, ask what they might misguide you. That's true. So hopefully you can know soon. You're in charge. I don't know. Anybody else want to pipe in?
Sure, you can. So you start off ringing plain bob and it stinks. So you call it round, and say, let's just start with plain hunt or whatever and see if that works. And if that works, that's great. And then you move on to something else that your band can ring, because your visitors don't have to ring in everything. And you can try to include them as appropriate. Maybe they can ring tenor, maybe they can ring treble. But visitors are wonderful, but usually, well, certainly if you're doing service ringing, more comes into play than at just a practice.
Right.
And you can say, the ringing isn't good enough without saying, and it's your fault. I guess
Right,
what I mean.
I look up what's going on beforehand frequently to see what they've rung and where they're coming from. And if somebody's rung half a dozen quarters in different methods, you're probably reasonably comfortable. Otherwise, you sort of just start out and take a look at them. Talk to them as they come in, of course, but then just start ringing and take a look at them. And I think you can pretty quickly make decisions.
I'd say, there's the other side of that. If they might be far beyond what your band can do, and that's great, and they can, you can take advantage of that certainly, and stretch your band a little bit with it.
Right, right. Good
Well, one of the things, if they have emailed ahead, some people tell you what they can do and sometimes they inflate it. Some people don't, but we would usually try to at least ask them. We do the internet trolling that Bob's talking about on Bellboard. And also, if I have somebody who's ringing quarters and they're coming to the post office where all we do is the rounds and call changes, maybe if we're lucky, we're going to tell them that so they know as well what to expect ahead of time if we have email communication.
Is that because the post office is difficult, Quilla?
No, it's because nobody attends practice.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Another thing I do sometimes, if I know somebody's coming, I'll check with their tower captain if I know who it is or know where they're going, and I can get some guidance from that too. But Sarah, you're talking about kind of, oh God, this is not what I expected. What do I do now?
Well, that's what I told.
I mentioned about keeping, shoot, I'm sorry. There we go. Small local practice. What's your population? Yeah, if you can find out what people want to do, how ambitious. And then, keep an eye on, make sure nobody sits for too long is a good goal, I think. All right. So I mentioned some responsibilities. I'm sure there's more that I haven't thought of, but so I say this, be kind and direct. Be kind is, it's probably obvious, but it still gets lost sometimes. I think, it's just setting a good environment is in your best interest. The direct part, I think, is, for example, like assigning bells if necessary. You can say, okay, everybody catch hold, and I'm sure everybody's been in a situation where somebody says that and nobody catches hold, and then just kind of wait, and everybody looks around, and you'll lose some time with that. Can you still hear me? I just need to plug something in.
I can still hear you. Yes.
Oh, good. No problem. All
I
right.
hear you.
Okay, good. All right. So, for example, of being direct, okay, Fred, take the 4, and we're doing this method. The make it unnecessary part is, I'm thinking of, if you're not leading the session, but you can help the person who is leading the session a lot, right? If they say, okay, catch hold, you actually catch hold, and you don't delay and make things tougher for the leader to run things. And then the other thing I'm sure you've seen is, I've seen it many times, is you start ringing and you just stay in rounds and everybody looks around and says, well, who's saying start and stop? And the leader never said, okay, Ruth, you're in charge of starting or stopping, or you're conducting or calling call changes or whatever. Everybody just kind of looks around and waits and then finally said, oh, I should have told you to start. That's a good thing to make sure you do before the ringing starts. And it's a good opportunity to spread the wealth around. Somebody who doesn't normally call can certainly say, stand when it's time to say stand, and get somebody used to hearing their voice in the towers. Worth doing, I think. Anybody have any other thoughts on what the job of leading a session is? I don't hear anything, so okay. Chatting. This is, I suppose, kind of a pet peeve, but I think a lot of times a lot of time can get wasted. And perhaps that's okay. It goes to how ambitious the band is. And this sounds harsh, so I apologize, but I truly believe that sometimes people will intentionally start chatting. I'm real quiet, so could somebody just check and say hello, Tom?
Hi, Tom.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right. I get nervous. I'm thinking I'm talking to myself. Okay, so the deal with chatting, I think sometimes people want to avoid ringing. You know, they maybe feel like, you know, they're feeling.
They're being passive aggressive is what you're
I think
saying.
so, absolutely, yeah. And they're uncertain about their ringing, insecure, and they say, well, if I can kind of keep talking, then we won't have to ring, and boom, the practice time has gone away, and that bugs me.
We'll just let Quilla shoot them a dirty look.
Well, yeah,
That'll silence them.
Well, I'd like a comment here that Quilla had advised me that there are certain things that if you're not sure where your start is, or you want to think about the method, you've got to figure out something to throw in there to delay things for a minute or two.
yeah, right.
So I think chatting also, it may depend on how full and busy the practice is. So if you have a practice with 6 people, you may allow more chatting, you know, sort of time in between, because people get sick of ringing all the time sometimes. And if you have a practice with 20 people, you want to keep it going so that everybody gets a chance. So how much time is okay may vary from, depending on the nature of the practice.
I totally agree with that. And that's kind of what I was thinking with how ambitious the group is.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. That's also impacting on how many people are there.
I think it also helps to give an assignment to the others that are not ringing. Maybe they're looking at their phones at the blue line or something like that. Then they're occupied, not necessarily just watching the ropes.
Tom, when you say set aside time, are you talking about after the practice or before the practice?
Let me delay that for just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you. Yeah, that's good. But what did I want to say? So how do you avoid the chatting? I think, you know, this is, you know, you can be direct and say, okay, we're ringing this, and hopefully you can do that without getting mad and mean. But kind and direct. Hopefully, I don't know if Quilla's got the look, I guess. Other ideas for keeping things moving?
In our tower, someone often just says, let's ring,
Yeah.
if
okay.
people are chatting too long.
All right. Yep.
I try break time's over. Break time's over.
Yeah. I don't, and this is a tough sociological experiment, right? All this stuff, but you know, you perhaps talking individually with somebody, saying, "Boy, I wish we could keep it moving a little bit." Right? What's going on with you know?
Well, there's nothing wrong with saying, come on, let's keep it moving. And you can also tell people you can say, this is what we're ringing now. Next, we're going to ring BLAP, and so on, so that you can ask people to get ready for the next thing as you're ringing whatever it is, depending on how many people, obviously, there are, but if there are enough people, so that in a sense, you queue people up ahead of time, I guess, kind of, is a possibility.
Yep.
In our tower, after practicing a method, people want to take a break, they sit down for a little bit. I know that me and others, we just go pick a bell, and we can continue practicing by ourselves, whilst others might be resting or chatting. So for us, it hasn't been really an issue. I think that now people resting, they chat a bit, and then I'd say about 3-5 minutes, then we start again practicing methods. So far, it's going pretty smoothly, I would say, during practices.
Yeah, that sounds good. So you're taking some initiative to keep yourself going.
Yeah, bringing down bells or trying different, helping with our handling, especially for us who have joined recently. Every single minute of practice counts for something. Okay, we really want to fill up our time as much as possible, and they allow. Okay, anybody is welcome to go and practice by themselves while there is a downtime.
So set aside time. What I'm thinking about that, and some of you have heard this. I started doing this with the online practice, but I set aside a time to chat because people would want to chat, but I was finding that the chatting kind of overwhelmed the practice time. And when we said, okay, everybody knew that at a certain time we'd break from ringing, and then I think the ringing portion became more productive because they knew they'd have a chance to talk to people. So that's an option that I mentioned.
Well, in Philadelphia, we used to have a time set aside for announcements because while some of us would go out afterwards and discuss, future ringing and talk about a method, we used to set like maybe 5 or 10 minutes aside for announcements. But once that was over, we went back to ringing. But that was sort of our time to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
So we tried not to have small individual 2 people chatting, but it was a group communication. And we used to do that like sort of maybe 2/3 of the way through the practice when everybody was there and before anybody left. And that seemed to work for a while. We haven't done that much though now.
Yeah, it comes and goes. I think if people know it's coming, then you can kind of keep it corralled a bit, perhaps.
I find there's quite a different degree of need to chat amongst different ringers. At one point, we had a social time afterwards every couple of weeks, and then it turned to once a month, and that's about where we are now. But I find it does make a difference in terms of how we all relate to each other if we do have some of that time.
Yeah, right.
Do people actually meet every time? After every practice? We're at about once a month now.
Say that again, John. Do they what?
We bring snacks and drinks about once a month and just hang around for half an hour or an hour even sometimes after the practice. I'm just curious what others do.
It varies from tower to tower. Some people go to the pub afterwards, which in a way, which is a big chat time.
Yeah.
In DC, we don't do anything, which is too bad. But so I think that varies from tower to tower.
Yeah, that's right on there. That affects us a lot.
But we used to have food up in the tower because we had a refreshments chair.
Yeah, that's
long gone.
Yeah.
Well, we started bringing food because people found it was too pricey to go out, but I do find it makes a difference in how we relate to each other if we can do it at least once a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I certainly agree that it varies from tower to tower and from eon to eon. When I first started ringing, it was 8 months before something came up and I referred to my husband, and one of the other ringers said, "Oh, awfully glad a husband surfaced for you. We weren't sure whether you were divorced or unmarried." I'd been ringing in the tower, but we knew nothing about each other.
Yeah.
So, but I think that as for chatting and not chatting, I'm a little bit like Lynn Codrich. I want to ring, ring, ring. And sometimes I am concerned that it might offend the ringing master, who in our case is almost always the tower captain. And I'm loath to do that. I think that relationships within the tower are extremely important. So we do a little bit of tiptoeing around each other in that regard, I think.
So
I think-
Faith, are you still meeting once every 8 months for a social?
Oh, actually, we have occasionally gone to the pub also. We used to go all the time. We had a court appeal for Alan Batten recently, and we got the quarter, which is the first time we've done for some time. And it was on the first try, and we were so happy and so excited. We all went down to the pub and got back about 10:30 and had tickets on all our cars, which were parked in the parking lot. And later found out that because they don't want people staying overnight, they ticket you at 10 o'clock. But we just phoned the church office and they fixed all the tickets. But, you know, going to the pub used to be a fairly regular occasion, but if we're all going to get tickets on our cars, that's a so I don't know. But I can certainly see that it's a tricky social kind of thing, to how much chatting and how much not. So I'm very interested in the conversation you've been having.
Yeah,
I'm also
oh, go ahead, Faith, sorry.
going to get on to how we can help the tower captain. And some of that, in my case, is by keeping my mouth shut.
And why do you say that, Faith? I'm not sure I understand why.
Well, I'm inclined to say, let's ring. And that I think it's better to let the tower captain decide when they want to ring. And it's easy to say, why don't we ring such and such? But that might not be what the tower captain has in mind. He may wish to bring in one of the learners into something that is one step up from what they've been doing. So, as I say, it's best for me just to keep my mouth shut and let the tower captain run the practice.
Well, maybe if you ask what's next so that you can prepare for it.
There's a good idea. That's not offensive.
No, it leaves the tower captain in charge of what are we with ringing, but it also sort of is a bit of a nudge of, gee, I'd like to be on the end of a bell rope.
Yes, yes.
And, yeah. And but without being assertive or obnoxious about it. It's just sort of offering encouragement by throwing yourself into the fray.
I think it's okay to say let's ring X, Y, or Z, because otherwise, like, how would the tower captain know what people want to ring?
I think one of the things that we do sometimes too is say, next week, let's ring such and such, or we'll concentrate on such and such, or let's try a new method. And that works quite well. If everybody comes the following week ready to ring something. Unfortunately, the issue probably with all towers is that you don't always have the same people there the next week.
Faith, I was wondering, and everybody was wondering if private conversation with the tower captain would be fruitful, or that would just be trickier.
No, I think that's a good idea, and particularly to have it maybe between practices, if you can find 10 minutes somewhere to say, what would be helpful if I suggested such and such, or, you know, what to try and get on the same page with the tower captain, I think is a very good idea. And everybody wants the tower to run well. So I think having a conversation about it is not a bad idea.
Any other thoughts?
About the tower captain?
Well, yeah, we're about ready to move to a bigger practice setting, so I'd love to, I think this is probably, the smaller is where we're gonna have more discussion, actually, so I don't want to end discussion too soon.
One thing we find helpful is there are 3 different people who run practices. And we find it's helpful, especially for the learners. When a learner is assigned someone for the evening, people don't step in and give 100 different comments. Whatever comments the one tutor gives that night, that's it for the night, unless that tutor asks for other comments.
That's excellent.
And the same thing for what the person running the practice says. We try to not criticize, what the exercise is or what the method is or whatever. Just do it because there's probably a reason for it. And then the next week it's someone else anyway. I would love it if more people got involved running practices, so I think it's a really good exercise to focus on what you want to do.
I meant to mention before, if you have access to like a chalkboard or just you can get a piece of paper or something, and people could write down things that they'd like to ring. That can be useful at times.
Yeah, we usually start with everybody being asked what they want to do that evening.
In fact, for us, the learners, what we complain about is we don't have enough practice. Okay, there is one practice is with the bigger group, the methods, and then on the Wednesday it's all the learners where it's more more basic, more practicing our handling, and we would like more. We would like 2 or 3 practices. I think we could even run our own practice, but we're having. I would like to be able to get us to have more practice. Is at least for the learners, and either it's to find the people available that can be tutoring. I know that most of the people that are tutoring live pretty far from the tower, so it's a relatively long commute for them, and we understand that. But we would like, I would like at least 2 or 3 a week, just for us, when we as much as possible, so that we can learn faster. Anyway, it's just a thought.
I think that's a good idea, Mario. One thing we've been encouraging people to do is ask for pop-up practices, not necessarily every week, but we check in the week what people are available for, and if there are enough people, then we do a pop-up practice for it.
Good point. Yeah.
We have started Saturday practices for 2 people who are working and living far away and can't come other times. So once it started off being once a month, it has become a little more often than that. And the thing that has been fun about it is that we thought that Saturday practices would probably have 6 or 8 people there. Well, everybody turns out for those Saturday practices just as they do for the Tuesday night practices. So we're having a lot of fun doing that.
Okay, I think I'll go ahead and move to big practices. Yeah, big practice. So I'm thinking like, well, certainly like an AGM or it's a ringing event. So you've got people from out of town coming. So the first thing about knowing your population is going to be trickier, right? Because there's going to be more people that you don't know. So what do? You need to ask, I guess, is perhaps you need to watch. And there's probably more people, so it's probably more of an issue to keep things moving. So here's a couple things I have done. Let's see, I frequently, like for Chicago events, so I'll have a poster and people can put their name on there and check what they want to ring. Also, I can update that. If somebody rings something, then I can put a check mark. And so then I know if somebody needs to ring some more. I don't want to have somebody sitting around and then at the end realize that they didn't get a chance to ring much. So that can help with that. I would say like newish ringers frequently are reticent to ask to ring. They'll just, no, I don't want to get in the way of all you experts, and the almost always the experts, quote unquote experts, enjoy nothing more than helping somebody who's newish. So I try to make that make a statement about that you're really doing people a favor if you step in. Let's see. I will ask them to kind of what's the word? Advocate for themselves, which is sometimes takes some doing. Ask them to be bold, but also if you're not leading the session, but you're a quote unquote experienced ringer, you can look for somebody to put under your wing and say, okay, come here, and we'll make sure you get a ring. That's a useful thing to, if you're not the captain, but you can still help things out in that way. I remember I've said, like if in encouraging people to step forward and make sure they advocate themselves. I'm going to feel really bad if I find out later that you didn't get to ring. So don't make me feel bad. Step forward. Let's see. And the last thing I'll mention, and then I'll certainly look forward to hearing other people's thoughts. One time, this was at the Boston AGMs, 5.5 years ago, but I was going to lead a session and it was daunting because it was going to be busy. And I had the thought, Michael Tartell was there, and Michael ran here, and I asked him if he'd be my assistant for the session. And that was great. I encourage people to think about that. If you're leading a big session, to have somebody else. And Michael, I'd kind of watch things, and if it was time to start the next thing, I could say, okay, here we go, next. But Michael was kind of getting things organized. He was queuing people up. It was great. And it just took a lot of pressure off what I was trying to do. So that's something. So anybody have thoughts they'd like to share about leading a big practice?
I'll throw out a couple of comments that I've been to a variety of events, some of them very, very good in terms of the way they were organized, others almost a disaster. And I think you're really right on, first off, the organizers have to do some planning in advance and make sure that there are, I think, specific sessions that are going to be geared to everyone. But when it really is a free-for-all, and which happens in some cases, it really ends up that those people who could use the most help are left in the lurch in terms of having opportunities to ring. So keeping those people involved is very, very good. There were a couple of the towers in this last Boston AGM where I thought people did an excellent job of talking about what's on next. We're going to go up for an hour, transitioning, making sure that at the lower end of ringing, there were people there, and there were 4 or 5 at least people who could be standing behind and helping out. I think Miriam was one of those people who managed to get some nice advances in some of that work. So it really is something that the planners, I think, have to think about a lot in advance. Your idea of having an assistant, to me, is a very, very good one, because if
It's
if
a
it's
lot.
not controlled and managed in some manner, there's going to be some, I'm going to call aggressive rope holders, who get an awful lot of time in there. And that becomes very, very difficult to manage if you haven't thought about it in advance. And
That's,
obviously picking good people to run sessions is important. There've been quite a few places where there's a chalkboard or whiteboard or something, and one of the first things that the coordinator is doing is, as people are arriving, what would you like to do? You'll see a list of things, and then a transition through those things, and they vary in difficulty depending on who's there and things. So anyway, that's just a couple of comments for people to take pot shots at.
well, Bob, you're absolutely correct, and Tom is also correct. To have a second person, if you're running something for an hour or 75 minutes, it's really hard to keep track of who's rung what, who's gotten something out of it, who needs to ring more. It's not an easy task. It's very, very difficult. And I think at some of the AGMs, when they break it up into rounds and call changes and plain hot, and then they do surprise, and then they do, triples and major. You need to make sure that you get all, especially when it's the lower end, you get rounds and call changes, you need some experienced people in there. And that's when the people that are running the sessions need to coerce or cajole some of the more experienced ringers to come and help out. And again, you're right. Some people we used to call them rope hogs, will just jump in all the time. And at the last, well, I've been at 2 ringing events recently, and I don't want to give too many names, but some of the ones that they asked to run sessions, and if they didn't know the people and they didn't know how to run a session, they really shouldn't have been the leader of that session. They should have been maybe the person, the backup. So it's not easy, but the pre-planning is really hard, is really important too. Like you said, you got to know who you're asking to run each session, and you want to make sure that some people won't advocate for themselves. They'll sit back, and the person running it has to get up and say, I want you to ring next, and please ring. I don't want to go into too many details, but I've had a lot of issues with big sessions and people not walking out and being unhappy. So it's hard. It's really hard.
I will, anticipating the Honolulu AGM, 50 steps up and down. The 2000 AGM, where I was still working, so I wasn't greatly involved, but one of the things that they were doing was organizing down at the bottom of the tower, who are the 12 people that are going up the next time? What are we going to do?
Right.
And then, cycling people, because people had to come down. There's no passing each other or anything. You've got to get people up and down. So something like that, if you can actually, if people are gathered enough and you can pick, like one of your towers, Eileen, is pretty small and cramped.
Right.
Only so many people, and yet you want to have some helpers up there where they're needed. So if you can organize a session in advance where it's going to be an hour and, okay, this team is going in, somebody else is coming out. Raleigh's an easy one because it's ground floor, and you're in and out in a minute or two.
And they when they had their AGM, they really managed to get people to sign up for the different sessions. Well, it didn't work perfectly. it really did work because there was so little room in that tower. You had to be careful how many people would get in there. With Sewanee, it was a little different, and some of the people that they had running sessions weren't that comfortable or weren't that familiar with doing it, and those were some of the sessions that were just people, constantly ringing and not offering ropes around. At least the couple of sessions that I wasn't in a lot of sessions. I was too busy, but some of the ones I just felt bad for some people that were in there and just sat back and never got to ring much. So you got to know who you're asking to run sessions, and having a second person is the only way to go when you've got an hour and you want to get through a lot in that hour and not have too much dithering.
I wanted to make a comment about just generally when you're trying to put together anything. This is relative to big practice, little practice, and maybe even service ringing on Sunday. Whoever's putting it together, and once again, this may be more just in your tower, maybe a little less so in something like a ringing weekend. But if there's a limit. If you're trying to do something, right, you want the ringing to be pretty good. It's hard to learn much when it's just a real mishmash of striking. And if the band is weak, that's likely to happen. So the thing is you have to, when you're planning any bit of ringing, you have to make sure that the band is strong enough. And that means there's a limited number of people that are on the lower end of skills for what it is you're trying to ring. And that's just something you have to keep in mind anytime you're trying to make progress on ringing or to do good ringing. Clearly, if it's a practice session, that's one thing. Service ringing, of course, you'd want an even higher standard. But just pick the people that the touch is around that you're trying to make sure have a chance to ring well and improve if you're doing some kind of practice. And that's like if you've got 8, that's 2 people or 3 people that you're trying to put in amongst 5 or 6 other people who are experienced. Or anyway, you just want to make sure it's salted with people that are trying to learn or achieve at that level. And then you need, if possible, to have stronger ringing, because you'll make more progress when the striking's good. You will learn more faster collectively and individually.
See, on this slide, I have responsibilities, and it's similar. Well, it's the same as what was on for a local practice, but these are basic responsibilities again. I think it can be stressful to lead a big practice, and in that it can get so somebody starts screaming a bit or getting frustrated, and that's to be avoided, obviously, if possible, and it's worth mentioning here. And being direct is useful. So you just, okay, here's what I want you to do. Take this bell, please, and keep things moving that way. So it's the same as the local practice, but keep things moving. And likewise, put somebody in charge so you don't ring rounds for 5 minutes before you realize that you should have assigned somebody to ring or to lead. Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking then about placing the band, at least placing some of the people in the band.
Well, that's right. Yeah. So it depends. You don't know how much you're going to have to do. If everybody will just grab hold, that's one thing. If they won't, then you place them to keep things moving, and you might need to place individuals. That's somebody who's working on a new method, and okay, put them on the spell, and also you might put somebody, ask if they want somebody standing behind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what we try to do is place our learners in between more experienced learners.
There you go. Yeah, good. Yep.
I think something Tom touched on there there are some, reluctant people who come into a session because they think it's at their level. And when somebody says grab hold, they never do. They're just maybe not that confident to grab hold. And so I think it's very important as whoever's running it to really keep track of who's there. And of course, like at Swanee, sometimes there were so many people up there, I'm not sure that the leader could necessarily keep track of everybody and who was involved.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, we kind of talked about that, I think, and it's worth talking about again. Yeah, if the leader can keep track of it, that's great. If somebody who's newish can be encouraged to advocate for themselves, that can be helpful. And likewise, somebody fairly experienced can see somebody new, that the leader might miss, and they can take them under their wing and make sure they get some opportunities. So there's at least 3 things that can be done to help that. Is that talking about what you are thinking, Bob?
Yeah, my primary idea there is that there are some people who are just, you say grab hold, and they're never going to grab hold unless somebody says, okay, so-and-so bring the 3 this time. Or something like that. And it may be hard to keep track of you have a really pretty good size.
Yeah.
And
So
in some
that's-
cases, we're going to places where it's not so frequent for me anymore, but where you don't know a lot of the ringers, and you don't really know who should be doing what and that sort of thing. And that obviously complicates it a bit.
Yeah, right. And that's part of the pressure on the leader that, if we can kind of ease that a little bit, that's worth doing. But yeah, it's a lot to keep track of.
But try to make sure that everybody who is in at a certain level and needs that level, try to make sure that everyone gets it. And if certain people like Tom Farthing happen to be there, he probably doesn't have to ring anything. He can just be helping people out all the time.
I think when I was in Washington, D.C. the first time, they had somebody going around with a clipboard asking people, what would you like to ring? So that they knew who to bring into grands or triples when they were going to ring grands or triples or whatever. That seemed to work very well.
Very good. Okay. So let me move along here. Can I move? There we go. Chatting. Oh, yeah. So similar but different, I would say. So with a big event, it's quite likely that you're going to have old friends or new friends really want to see each other and chat and catch up. And that's to be supported. And yet, it can get in the way of keeping things moving. So what do you do? I think one thing, there's almost certainly going to be other opportunities for socializing at a big event. So remind people of that and encourage them to save it. Let's see. Yeah. So and there's a question about how much is okay, right? If it's a really big event and you just have to keep things moving, or it's beneficial to keep things moving, then you got to step in and say, not now.
But I think one of the things that enters in, if it's an event with people from lots of places, this can happen at a practice night as well, but more so probably at one of these. You get one of the people for whom this is a challenger who wants to ring it, and if they have someone standing behind, when they stop, the person standing behind may want to talk to that person.
Yeah. Okay.
and you probably need to sort of tell them, go over in the corner, please, so we can ring the next thing.
Right.
Because the talk is valuable, but you don't want it taking time away from the next thing you're trying to fit into your 60 minutes or however long.
Until just now, I'd never really thought about this, but maybe it'd be a good idea if the leader for that type of situation starts out with just a couple of remarks. We're here to ring. We want to focus on giving everybody a chance, but we really want to have the bells moving along and try to make the best out of our 55 minutes or an hour or whatever it is.
Proactive, huh? Yeah, that's good.
Might give everybody a chance to a little bit start thinking, and everybody's going to recognize that the ringing time is so valuable in those events that you really want to try to keep the bells going as best you can.
Yeah.
I remember being in Charleston back in the days of the Ring Around Charleston, and I think it was in maybe St. Michael's anyway, a really big room. And the person who was running it was fantastic. She had 3 different groups, and it was, I don't know, Plain Hunt, and then Granser triples or whatever, and then there was Stedman or whatever. And so it was just, moving really, really quickly from one group to the next. And so any of the chatting that Quilla mentioned could happen, when the next group was ringing. And there were really a lot of us there, but I just remember thinking how well-oiled that all seemed, that everybody got lots of practice, and also had time to chat in between when they weren't ringing.
Yeah, there's benefits to chatting, certainly. Yeah, that's good. As long
But
as
I mean, in terms of
it's
the
not,
tutor
passive
versus 2T type thing.
aggressive.
Well, in Seattle last month, they had a ringing weekend, and on the Saturday there was quite a few people there, and they even set aside like tea time. They took like 20 minutes, a half hour out, and everybody had tea during the afternoon. This was after lunch, and people were getting tired because it was constant ringing, which they started at 10, broke at 12 for lunch, came back at 2. But when we were in the tower, it was nonstop ringing, and Rachel Pusey was running the session and had, a couple of people. She had some people have had clipboards and writing down what everybody was ringing and whose turn it was next to ring, maybe Stedman or Plain Bob or even just, Plain Hunt. And it was nice to have that 20 minutes of break time where people could walk around and talk to people, because there were a lot of people that I hadn't seen in years. And we just had that little bit of social time. So that was well thought out, the way they ran their Saturday session.
Eileen, you weren't there on Sunday, but they did exactly the same thing, and it was even more needed on Sunday.
Okay. Well, you probably had you might have had less people, but
No, but in the sense that people were really tired, so having that tea break was really great.
I know it was lovely to have that tea break. I saw it on the schedule and I didn't know what to expect, but it was really nice because I really enjoyed Seattle. I feel bad that I didn't stay into this Sunday, but can't be everywhere.
Phone yourself, Eileen.
Yeah, I should try and do that.
So our hour is almost up. So I think, anybody have anything they want recorded? I'm going to see if I can stop the recording.
Let's record that Tom did a great job.
Yes.
Yay, Tom.
Huh. There it is.